Hello and welcome to the Course on Tête podcast. As always, we welcome Peloton subscribers and Aérogramme listeners. I'm OJ Borg, part-time cycling journalist, full-time Lycra fancier. Alongside me for this episode is Jeremy Whittle, part-time cycling writer, full-time bon viveur. Bonjour, Jeremy.
Good evening, OJ.
And alongside him, well, not next to him, but on the Zoom call, is Peter Cossins, part-time classics authority, full-time monument.
Thank you, OJ. Good to see you.
Now, in this thrilling instalment, we'll have a roundup of all the action from another Super Sunday, which includes a heady mix of the Giro d'Italia and this.
Flanders! What? Flanders!
But before we go any further, let's visit the Leather Club Chair of Knowledge, where William Fotheringham has all the news from the last 7 days of full-on bike action.
Another tumultuous week in the wild and woolly world of pandemic pro cycling. Let's start with last week's big news. Mark Cavendish hinting at retirement. Yup, it was only a hint. Cav rode Schelde Price on Wednesday and Flanders on Sunday and let it be known he's up for another contract. Quick stepper in the mix, so too a Polish Conti team that I've never heard of. Next up, the curse of the rainbow jersey. If you don't believe in it, cross your fingers behind your back and observe Julian Alaphilippe. Another monument went west on Sunday with yet another bizarre incident. A crash with a motorbike in Flanders after that disastrous sprint in Liège. Well, he's got the winter to rethink and recuperate. At Flanders, the tightest of sprints saw Mathieu Vanderpool finally take the monument we all knew he had in him, while Boel Stolmans engineered a tactically perfect win for Chantal van den Broek-Black. There was no Flanders for the Paul Ricard team, which ceased to function midweek due to lack of funds, putting an end to a 15-year run for the team formerly known as Bigler, one of the longest standing squads in the women's peloton. The week began with a rash of positive COVID tests at the Giro, sufficient to cause a few to doubt. Among them, the EF education team, who wrote to the UCI asking for the race to be stopped. It didn't go down well in Italy, particularly when a second string of tests all came up negative later in the week. There'll be yet more COVID tests on Monday, and those will set the tone for the final week. As far as the racing went, Peter Sagan put an end to his 15-month victory famine on Tuesday, and Arnaud Démare made it 4 stage wins in 8 days at Rimini. Also flying at the Giro are Ineos, who have transitioned well to stage hunting. Filippo Ganna took his third on Saturday, and with wins for Jonathan Narvaez and Geoghegan Hart, they've taken 5 wins out of a possible 15. Now, with GH flying, they may have to transition back to the GC race. On Sunday, at the first major mountaintop finish at Piancavallo, the pink jersey João Almeida faltered badly, leaving the race up for grabs going into the final week, prompting the question, how long can João last?
William Fotheringham there from the Leather Club Chair in his private members club. Now, Jeremy, I had been really enjoying this weird compacted mega calendar. Today, though, too much. I couldn't deal with the many screens I needed.
No, I know. There was a lot going on, wasn't there? Well, I didn't feel it was quite as bad as last weekend, which was, what was last weekend? The Giro plus a whole raft of one-day races.
Wevelgem.
Yes, of course, yeah. So it didn't feel quite as bad, but then that may have been partly because I decided to not sit in front of 3 screens from kind of 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So that, and went out for a walk with the dog at one point. So that was perhaps a good thing.
Yeah. I think when there's 3 great races on, you just end up feeling like that guy from Clockwork Orange. Like your eyes have been opened up and you have to watch many screens at many times. Peter, how many screens did you go for today?
I just had one. I just completely focused on Flanders and then just went to the Giro afterwards. That was it. I know people had problems on Eurosport because they were flicking between the two within the races. And I mean, that would have blown my mind, to be honest.
That it did indeed blow my mind because I was that person getting confused as to what was happening. Anyway, you mentioned the F word. So let's talk Flanders. 267 kilometres came down to the throw of a bike. Mathieu Vanderpool taking it from Wout van Aert on the line after they'd both gone clear. How, Peter, have they been avoiding each other?
Well, I guess ever since they were kind of going head-to-head, slugging it out on the cyclocross circuit full-time, probably, I guess, 3 seasons ago now, they really have just stayed away from each other. I mean, Van Aert's tried to remake himself, I suppose, as a more rounded rider. He's ridden Grand Tours, he's won time trials, he's won sprints. I mean, Vanderpool's kind of focused much more on the classics because that's what his team's kind of built for. He's not a Grand Tour team at all. He's not ridden one yet. And I guess that's partly the reason they're kept apart. I mean, last week we saw at Geoghegan this bizarre situation where they marked each other completely out of the game, and Mads Pedersen benefited from that. And I mean, today was just quite remarkable in the way that they ended up kind of pitched together at the end, and we had this classic finale.
It was very striking, wasn't it? I don't know if you saw the pictures from the start this morning, where Alaphilippe was fist bumping with Van Aert as they stood on the start line, and Mathieu van der Poel was just staring straight ahead as these two fists kind of met in front of him. And then during the kind of the final stages of the race this afternoon, it looked like they barely established any eye contact. And then afterwards, when they were both on the podium, there's a fist bump as well, but they're both almost looking the other way. And it looks like they're almost kind of completely ostracized from each other. It's quite odd. But I guess when you are sitting on the wheel of your biggest rival in the sport, the guy who stands in the path of your greatness, I don't know, then maybe there's no time for niceties, I guess.
It's a great rivalry. I mean, we're talking about here, possibly, I mean, you'd know this better than me, Peter. Are we talking about the future of the classics for the next decade?
Could be. I mean, certainly both of them could probably win any of the classics. I mean, if they put their mind to it, they could win them all. I mean, certainly we're going to have a lot more contests between them. There's no doubt about that. I mean, one thing that was interesting about today was that it was incredibly cagey. I mean, I just felt like, I mean, it was obviously a great finale, but I just felt like the race went a bit flat. I mean, we'll come to a reason for that later when we talk about what happened to Julian Alaphilippe. The two of them kind of, they collaborated with each other. They came into the finish. And for me, it wasn't the kind of Flanders that I like to watch. There wasn't a lot going on the climbs. That's where we would like to see the action. And they basically, it was almost as if they were so strong, they almost flattened the climbs. It rode over them together. It
was almost like a Morricone kind of standoff, wasn't it? Where you've got, some spaghetti western scene at the end where they're all standing in a circle and they're just staring at each other with their narrowed eyes. Who's the first one who's going to reach for their gun? And it almost reached that point in the last 500 meters where they almost slowed to a standstill, and Van Aert just wouldn't go through whatever the circumstances, and it led up to that an absolutely electrifying sprint. I mean, it was so quick, that sprint at the end, after all that distance, that they could sprint that fast. But it was very odd. It was kind of frozen in time, wasn't it? The last 500 meters, it felt like the race that almost the time stood still in the race.
I mean, I kind of at that moment, I was thinking back to the Amstel Gold Race last year, which Vanderpool actually won in a situation like that, where Alaphilippe and Jakob Fuglsang, I think it was, were kind of messing around with each other coming into the line, and Vanderpool actually burst through at the end and won it. And I was kind of envisaging some kind of repetition of that. But I mean, I think Vanderpool, well, both of them knew what they were doing. But certainly Vanderpool was looking back all the time. He could see where everybody was.
We keep mentioning Alaphilippe. Let's talk about the incident. So I'm going to attempt to set it up here, because this is what happened. The selection had been made. We are how far from the end had the selection been made? This was what, about 50K from the end? 40K from the end. The three favourites of Van Aert, Van der Poel and the world champion Alaphilippe are away. 30 seconds-ish on the bunch. Alaphilippe is on the back of the three. Van Aert is on the front, and he moves to the right-hand side of the road to get a draft off a moto that is decelerating. He moves around it. Van der Poel swerves last minute. Alaphilippe, who at that moment seems to be looking down, whether he's looking at his GPS or he's on the radio, possibly on the radio, clips the back of the moto, and he looks very injured. Twitter has gone mad about it, as you'd expect. Jeremy, who's at fault?
Well, it depends who you talk to, doesn't it? Because motorbikes and cars have a long history of interfering with races. I've just written a piece for La Course on Tête about how many, I mean, there are numerous incidents where motorbikes have caused accidents. Famously with Peter Sagan, Johnny Hugeland was taken out by a VIP car in the 2011 Tour de France. Greg Van Avermaet was collapsed on by a motorbike in the San Sebastian Classic a few years ago. So there's lots of incidents, many incidents over the years. On this occasion, however, I think that Julian Alaphilippe was just not being particularly vigilant about what was going on immediately in front of him. And because Van Aert and Van der Poel were trying to make the most of that slowing down motorbike, which was a race jury bike, to be clear. So it wasn't kind of a random bike, and it was there in an official capacity. Whether it's in the right place or not is another point. That which was also on the right hand side of the road, right on the verge, behind a Shimano neutral service bike with spare wheels, etc. on it. Those two bikes were in tandem, slowing down the right hand side of the road. They took a slipstream off them, pulled out, Alaphilippe, I'm pretty sure he looked down into his radio. You can't quite see it from the pictures, but I'm sure he looked down speaking to his radio. So he just dropped his eyes when he pressed the radio button. When he looked up, the bike was on him and it was too late.
And he clips it. Twitter's gone mad about it. Twitter it's another motorbike ruining a race. Alaphilippe, wearing the rainbow stripes, curse of the world champion, is at fault. Personally, it looks like bad luck. It looks like Alaphilippe just hadn't seen it. He's the back of the line. The bike had to be where it was. I think somebody suggested that they had been told to move behind the brake. That bike had been told.
Bear in mind, these are three of the quickest.
Yeah. The race was full on at this point.
Best, in the most pressurised, coveted one-day race at the end of, 250K, getting off 240, 250K. They're all under immense pressure, both athletically and mentally. I think he just made a mistake. And I think perhaps, there was talk afterwards that the motorbike was on the inside of a bend. But if you look at it from the aerial shot, to me, it looks like a pretty straight stretch of road, in which case they ride just past the motorbikes on a straight stretch of road. They're not blocking their line on the bend. And we've seen that loads of times, especially if you watch loads of racing on TV. You'll see the TV motorbikes sometimes can't get out of the way fast enough because the riders are so quick. But I don't think this is one of those incidents. Of course, it's easy to blame the motorbike because the guy's not a pro bike rider, so he's not got the same levels of skill. At the same time, they're pretty well drilled and schooled. And I mean, even sports directors make mistakes. Even sports directors take riders out. Even sports directors shunt each other's cars. Accidents will happen in bike racing,
I think one of the things that I found interesting about it was that people were making a comparison with the Giro stage a couple of days ago when Elia Viviani was taken out by a bike that was actually in the middle of the bunch when they were going around a corner and shouldn't have been there at all. Whereas, I mean, as Jeremy's just said, these two bikes, they had obviously been, it was the neutral service bike and the jury official bike. They were obviously being called back to slip in behind the three leaders because it had a 30-second lead, which you'd expect. So, I mean, Patrick Lefevre said that they shouldn't have been there, but they've got to be somewhere because they've got to slip in behind the brake. That's what they're there for.
But with the greatest respect to Patrick Lefevre, when was the last time that he accepted any responsibility for any mistake being made by any of his riders? And I know he's a wise old fox and all of that. But, whenever I've spoken to him and you say anything like that and say, oh, you know nothing about bike racing, and he'll walk off.
I always find that a terrible excuse. I saw a lot of ex-pro bike riders on Twitter basically saying, I know it's the moto's fault because I've raced bikes for 10 years.
Well, yeah, they will say that. And I'm sure that no one wants to blame the world champion for having made a mistake. On the back of that, though, you could say, what's his racing been like recently? It's hardly been, it's been brilliant. Thrilling, fantastic.
Is he too erratic?
Well, he's been a bit eccentric recently, hasn't he? I mean, he nearly lost two classic races with lifting his arm. He lost Liège-Bastogne-Liège because he lifted his arms too soon, and he misjudged Brabant-Chapelle as well when he nearly lost that when Vanderpool was on his wheel on the sprint, and he put his arms up again too soon. He had the bid-on incident in the Tour. Okay, people say, "What are you talking about, Jeremy? He's a brilliant bike rider," which he is. But at the same time, sometimes his I don't know if it's excitement, attention to detail, sometimes seems like he zones out or just doesn't pick up on things. And the Liège-Bastogne-Liège finish where he got relegated for a dangerous sprint and then lost the race and was zigzagging a lot in that last K. I mean, that was a prime example of Alaphilippe eccentricity.
Ultimately, it just comes down to one of those things like Jeremy was saying of there's a lot of vehicles in the race and things like this are going to happen. They can't avoid it.
I mean, I don't drive in bike races anymore. I used to. When I first started, I used to get these passes on the car, which meant you could drive in race. They were a lot more lax about it. And I got quite good at it. And then one year I was doing it, and I think, there were cars either side of me, motorbikes and bike riders, all kind of almost clambering into the front seat alongside me. We were all, that close. We could reach out and nudge each other. And everybody was that close. And I thought, if anybody just deviates from their line here, for a nanosecond, takes their eyes off what they're doing, this is a massive shunt, and it put me off. And I mean, you can't do it now anyway because they're so restrictive about it, but you used to be able to do it fairly easily. But it's incredibly dangerous.
I think it comes down to an unfortunate incident, and I think we all wish Alaphilippe well because A, I want him to be well and not to be injured, and B, because bike racing is better with him in it. Let's carry on talking Flanders. The women's Flanders shortened from 159 kilometres to 135. Still had most of the famous climbs and cobbled sectors in it. It was won by Chantal van der Broek-Blaak from Boels-Dolman after she attacked on the Quermont, 19 kilometres from the finish. I missed this, Jeremy, because I was still in the melee of trying to work out what screen I was looking at. This strange moment between Van Vleuten and Van der Breggen, where they were away and then they sat up.
Yeah, this was very odd because I was kind of writing and keeping an eye on that and keeping an eye on what the upshot of what had happened at the Giro. So as you, I had like a phone, a laptop and a TV all going at the same time, and I was writing. So I saw they'd gone away and I thought, that's the key break. And then I looked up again and they were riding alongside each other and they stopped racing. They were just freewheeling alongside each other and they were chatting and laughing. And I think it was they decided they negated each other out. So there was no point in racing because, well, they kind of bluffed each other out. And then the group caught up with them and went past them. But I was thinking, I don't know what Pete thinks again about this, but I thought that's not a terribly positive for image of women's racing, that they were on the verge of one of them was on the verge of great success in this coveted race, and they kind of stopped racing and they're laughing and joking. It just seemed odd.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the incident, but I mean, one of the things that Van Vleuten's really struggling with at the moment, I think, is the fact that Boels-Dolmans are able to kind of mark pretty much every move that she does. She doesn't have the teammates, especially in these races like Flanders, to compete with them at the same level. And I mean, who knows what Van der Breggen was saying to him? I mean, she'd probably just say, I'm just going to sit on your wheel all the way into the finish and then win the sprint. So you might as well give up now. I don't know. But I mean, it did look bizarre, or it sounds bizarre.
Well, I'd imagine that's exactly what the conversation was, because it seemed to be like quite a straight conversation. Then I looked up again and they were both laughing, like she just said, oh yeah, fair enough. But for the uneducated eye, I mean, we all understand the nuances and the tactics. For the uneducated eye, sat down to watch the women's Tour of Flanders, they get this pivotal point, big attack. I don't know. I thought it didn't present the greatest image of the sport, but
until you know though what was actually going on. Chantal van der Broek-Blaak beating Annemiek van Vleuten. I mean, Peter, that's no mean feat. When you look at Van Vleuten has won this year, the form she's in, that is no mean feat beating her. No,
I mean, she is in fantastic form, and I think that. I mean, we've seen this with Trek Segafredo when they've beaten her, with Lizzie Deignan and Elisa Longo Borghini, that they've had to be very, very clever in their use of tactics. And Boels-Dolman's got it absolutely spot on today. They knew that they kind of had the numbers and they played their cards very, very carefully and very well. And in the end, Chantal van der Broek-Blaak was the one who got away on the Eau de Quaremont and rode off to win the race that's kind of missing from her palmarès.
Did you just mention the word tactics there, Peter?
I did. I always like to mention tactics.
Oh, well, yeah. That's lucky, because tactically it was a Boels-Dolmans masterclass. And don't just take mine or Peter Cossins' word for it. Here's Nick Bull to break down those tactics.
A second Boels-Dolmans 1-2 in 3 editions of the Tour of Flanders may sound a little boring, but we should appreciate the Dutch team's performance in Sunday's Ronde rather than complain about it. The setup was simple. Anna van der Breggen would soften everybody up, while Chantal van der Broek-Blaak, Amy Peters and last week's Ghent-Wevelgem champion Jolien D'Hoore would keep their powder dry for as long as they could. Van der Broek-Blaak gave an indication of her form when she attacked coming off the Kruisberg, and after Annemiek van Vleuten countered her move, it was van der Breggen who rode across to her and then duly sat on her wheel. Van Vleuten rightly decided against pursuing this move any further, although you suspect that wouldn't have been the case had she been at her peak. The winning move came at the top of the Eau Quaremont, a seated attack that made Van der Broek-Blaak look more like a track rider than a classic specialist. But Boels still had work to do. Van der Breggen and Peters did all they could to hinder the chase on the Paterberg, then marshalled Mitchelton's Van Vleuten and Grace Brown as they tried in vain to bridge across to the lone leader. Up front, the Dutch rider was time trialling her way to victory, with Peters winning the bunch sprint for second, completing a good day in Flanders for Bowles Dolmans.
Nick Bull there, and you can read all of his tactical breakdowns on the La Course on Tête website. Now let's talk the Giro. We're recording this in the aftermath of stage 15. Ineos Grenadiers take their 5th stage win atop Piancavallo. After getting dropped on the final climb, Almeida has managed to just hang on to the pink jersey. He has 15 seconds over Wilco Kelderman from Team Sunweb. Hindley, also from Sunweb, is 2:56 back. Geoghegan Hart moves all the way up to 4th, 2:57 back, and Pello Bilbao from Bahrain McLaren at 3:10 down. Major losses for Nibali, for Bilbao himself, Fuglsang and Pozzovivo. Jeremy, can we rule them out now? Nibali, Bilbao and the rest. Are they now too far away after today's showing?
No, but they've got a lot of work. They've got a lot more work they had to do at the start of the race this morning. I think what's interesting is that I know I always talk about him every week, but who is Nibali basing his race around? Because he looked pretty rough today towards the last half hour, 40 minutes of that stage, but he recovered quite well and limited. I thought he limited his losses. He could have lost a shed load of time, but he didn't lose as much as I thought he was going to lose. And I was looking at the jersey afterwards and wondering, now who is he basing his race around? Because he will be basing it around someone that he thinks he can get back to, that he can get back within a minute or so of. And you look at that top 5, and it's hard to see who it might be. I mean, Kelderman maybe. Is he a soft contender in the sense that, you know, he's not a Grand Tour winner yet, and he's kind of, is he just having a purple patch because he's got a team that are riding really well, and in the last week is he gonna fall away in the last week? I mean, there's quite a lot of riders in the top 10 who are they're either moving up or they're moving down. No one seems to be staying still. I mean, Almeida actually has been perhaps the most impressive. That was the most impressive ride of the afternoon, I think, because he again looked like he was going to ship a load of time, and he actually limited his losses really well, and he's still got the jersey. So he was the most impressive performance. But it's very difficult to tell which way riders are going to go. Obviously, we've got a rest day, and then they come out sparring again on Tuesday. So we'll see. But it's in the balance at the moment, I think.
Yeah, let's hear from not Almeida himself, as none of us speak Portuguese. He's in his first ever Grand Tour. He's still wearing pink. 15 seconds as we go into the second rest day. Let's hear from one of his teams, though, about the day they've had. Here's James Knox.
Yeah, today was extremely hard. Very important day obviously for us defending pink. Yeah, and in the end there we did what we could. Joao limited his losses amazingly. Because it was a real brutal day out, high pace all day from the Sunweb team, and then full train coming into the last climb, and they just teared it apart. I got dropped there still with quite a way to go. 9K, something like this, 9K. I think I got dropped, even 10K. I can't remember. But just followed and tried to stay there in case anything happened to Joao or he came back to me. But yeah, I just ended up following different wheels and coming across the line in a respectable position. But yeah, the priority for us was staying with Joao. Yeah, it was just such a high pace that got blown off the wheel. Not really much more to say than that. Yeah, difficult day out. But still with the pink jersey.
So, Pete, I guess with Almeida, is his peri-peri chicken cooked? His Porton corked? His pastel de nata scoffed? Is he making Milan in the Maglia Rosa?
He could still do it. I mean, I can't see it, to be honest.
Get off the fence, Cossins. Come on.
I'm actually going to say that I think the rider who won today, Geoghegan Hart, is going to win the Giro. I think he looks, on the climbs, he just looks a class above everybody else. He looks really comfortable. He'll need to get a significant amount of time before the last time trial, which is only 15K, so he probably only needs like a minute or 90 seconds advantage. I mean, he's 3 minutes back on Almeida, I think, or thereabouts at the moment.
2:57.
Yeah, and Kelderman's the big danger for him, because Kelderman can time trial very well, and. But I think he's the strong guy. I mean, there's enough stages, assuming the weather's okay, for him to come through and take it. And I mean, Ineos they've won 5 stages now. They've got a lot of strong riders. Suddenly they've got something to ride for again. I just think they look like the team who are going to win it at the moment.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter what's going on now. It's where you stand in Milan at the end of next week. That's next a week this evening. That's what matters.
Oh, cliche.
Well, it's true, but it is true, isn't it? So all the kind of, he's climbed to here and he's doing this well and that well. It doesn't matter because if you win by 1 second, you still win. So I think I'm not surprised by Taggart and Hart because if you remember, I said last week that I thought he could get into the top 10.
No one remembers it. We've deleted all of those podcasts from everywhere we can find it to make sure no one remembers it, Jeremy, ever.
I've still got a remote file. Anyway, so and also it feels like there is just massive generational change going on within cycling in general. I mean, we saw it in Flanders, we saw it in the Tour, and we're now seeing it in the Giro as well. Are these old dogs like Fulzang and Nibali, have they still got what it takes to get on the podium?
It does see the generational change. And I mean this in the nicest way possible. Watching him win today, his maiden Grand Tour win, there was a level of arrogance. But when I mean by arrogance, you look at him and he looks like someone who believes he could win this Giro d'Italia. And I think that is important.
I think he's quite sure of himself, and that's a good thing in a bike rider because if you have any crisis of confidence, then you're
he looks
shocked.
like a young Wiggins. Does anyone else see that?
A little bit, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
He just needs the sideboard. Well, do you know what? We managed to actually get hold of him. Let's hear from Teo Gockenhart.
Yeah, I felt good. I've never really struggled after a TT, but it's always a bit of an unknown because it's a very different day to normal road stage, and obviously different bike and stuff. But yeah, I felt good. Consistently through the Giro, I felt better. And today again was no different. Yeah, it's definitely my biggest win. Nothing really comes close, I would say. But when it was just the three of us and I started to believe that I was in with a good shout, I just tried to focus on the job in hand. Really, I was definitely thinking about everyone in the team and my teammates, Tosso and Oli in the car behind with Diego, and also a little bit Nico in the last 5Ks. I've been dreaming all of this strange 2020 second half of the season to be able to dedicate a victory to him, and that was obviously super motivated to try and get a result in this Giro anyway, but that was definitely some added motivation for me. I've been thinking about that a lot the last couple of months.
Teo Gockenhart there, and I think it's a lovely sentiment, and I think it must be added reason and motivation to win a stage when he's talking about Nico Portal, Jeremy.
Well, yeah, it's obviously they've really struggled without Nico Portal this year. We saw that in the Tour de France. They've kind of had a lot of change at that team. Lots of Portal. Their CEO Fran Miller has now left the team and is moving to another CEO position within the Ineos group. And Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas haven't really figured this year at all in any of their Grand Tours. So
they might do on Tuesday. They might do on Tuesday, at least Froome.
They might do. Of course, we've got the wealth to come. But at the same time, it's been a real opportunity for people like Tao Gockenhart and Filippo Ganna and other riders to show their talent.
And it hasn't gone right for them so far. I mean, we look at what happened in the Tour de France. It wasn't brilliant. And after Geraint Thomas went home, we sort of thought maybe it was a disaster here at the Giro as well. But really, Peter, they've salvaged it. 5 stage wins. They've got Teo Gockenhart now within striking distance in 4th.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting listening to what they've been saying because they've given their riders, all of them, a chance to ride for stage wins. We've seen Puccio, we've seen Castroviejo, obviously Ganna's won 3 stages, Narvaez has won a stage, Teo won a stage today. But all the time, there's this kind of, in the background, they've been saying, I mean, I noticed that Ben Swift, when he came 3rd or 4th on a stage in the middle of the second week, saying, well, I spent the day keeping Teo out the wind, we're protecting Teo. And it's interesting, they've obviously had it in their minds that he was their backup GC rider and that he was going to come through. And he did lose some time, I think, going right back into the early part of the first week on Etna. I think he got dropped on the climb there and lost some time. And it didn't look great for him then. But like he says, he's got stronger all the way through the race, and he looks like the guy who's got the momentum at the moment.
Yeah, I think absolutely. But I think that's been the case. I think he's been a stealth contender, hasn't he? Because he was. I can't remember where he finished in that first time trial, but he's been kind of in the top. He was the upper reach of the top kind of 20. Then he's steadily gained ground little by little as the race has gone on, which is exactly the kind of progression you want. And now
it's GC riding.
And now as went to the final week, he hasn't. I don't think he's had a crash, has he? I don't think he's had any tumbles at
just
all.
Don't say it. Why would you say it at that point?
So he's riding a pretty controlled and immaculate race so far. So we'll see.
Just to weave into your point, you're talking about the changing of the guard. If you look at what Geoghegan and Hart is, he's 4th overall. He's behind 3 other riders. If you look at the young riders classification, he's only 3rd. I think that shows you that possibly we need to get rid of the young riders classification because they're all doing what they're doing. We talk about Ineos turning around their Giro. Let's actually hear what they're looking to achieve over the course of the final week. And we'll do that by hearing from Oli Cookson, the Ineos DS.
Good evening, everyone from Udine. We've just finished stage 15 of the Giro and just got back to the hotel after Teo's win. Going into the second rest day now. Yeah, so just starting from the beginning. Obviously, we had high hopes with G, and it's such a beautiful sport, but it can also be incredibly cruel, and we saw that with G. And yeah, we've adapted and we've moved on, and we've really started to well, as you've probably seen now, look at other opportunities, whether that be in the time trials or the breaks. And at the end of the day, these guys are bike racers now, not just bike riders. So we've been really looking to put them in the race each day and giving everyone their chances. Yeah, and just really enjoying the kind of the tactical side of it, whether it be just the getting in the breaks or how to win from the break, etc. And just really enjoying pushing the race forward, and everyone's been feeding off each other really, whether that, of course, the riders, but the staff as well. And then now obviously with Teo's win today, I think that was we've had some really beautiful wins. I think with young Johnny Narvaez winning, and then Teo today, I think we've just shown that we've got some impressive talent coming through. And with Teo now, he's moved up onto 4th on GC, 1 second behind 3rd. I think the main thing is there's no pressure. I think we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, stick to the process, whether that be looking after Teo. I think we're still going to look for opportunities for the future for some more wins next week, but we're just going to take it day by day. And then also there's the weather to consider, the fueling, the workload in that final week. And I think we've just got a really good group of riders and staff here, and we're all buzzing at the moment, and we're just going to keep pushing that forward, whether that be the race or the stages and the riders and each other. So hope everyone's okay, and see everyone on the road.
Oli Cookson there from Ineos Grenadiers, the Ineos DS. They're not saying they're going for GC. They're just taking it day by day. But surely now, Jeremy, that is going to be a priority for them.
Well, you think so, yeah. If you've got a ride in the top 5 and you're entering the final week of a Grand Tour, yes. And it would be a disappointment for them. I mean, that's always what they do. They always play things down. And in fact, the reality is their ambition to get him to get Geoghegan and Hart into the top 3 in Milan will be intense, I'm sure. And I think for the sake of a lot of people who don't know much about him, I mean, he's no slouch in the mountains as well. It may seem to some people who don't follow cycling that closely that he's come from nowhere, but in fact, he's got a pretty good record in stage racing. He's finished in the top 10 in the Tour de l'Avenir, which is the breeding ground for young riders. On a couple of occasions, he's finished 8th and 5th in the Tour of California in separate years, which is, again, no mean feat. And in 2019, which is probably maybe his best season so far, he finished 2nd in the Tour of the Alps as well, which is one of the key warm-up races for the Giro d'Italia, which has many of the riders who are now struggling the Giro as well. So, the pedigree is there. Maybe it's not as sparkling as some riders, but that's because he's always been in the service of riders like Freeman Thomas.
I would back that up. I mean, I went to the Route d'Occitanie, which is the first race to be held in France when the racing restarted right at the start of August, and Ineos completely dominated it. And particularly, there's one stage to the Col de Barède in the middle of the Pyrenees that Egan Bernal won. And his victory was completely, the latter part of it was set up by Pavel Sivakov, who's obviously another young rider we've heard a lot about. But Geoghegan Hart was the guy before Sivakov who completely blew the bunch apart. And I was actually quite surprised when he didn't get selected for their Tour de France team. I don't know whether there was some issue with illness or injury or what it was, or whether they just wanted to focus on the Giro. But he looked like one of their form riders in the mountains at that point. And of course, when we got to the Tour, they didn't really seem to have form riders. I mean, partly that was down to bad luck, but obviously there were other things at play as well.
I mean, the caveat to all of this is, of course, we're entering into uncharted territory for him pretty much, really, in terms of Grand Tours, because he's never been in this position before. And also, we're looking at kind of increasingly frequent numbers of alternative routes in case the weather's so bad towards the back half next week that they can't do some of the stages that were planned. So, there's still a lot of elements to come. Stars have to align, I think, for it to work out for him.
True, but we're talking about here, as we mentioned before, we're talking about a young, confident rider who can take stuff in the chart. The problem is, ahead of him are 3 young, confident riders. But it sets up the last week beautifully for us. And talking of that last week, and for a view of it from Italy, William Fotheringham has again spoken to Marco Pastonesi.
Welcome back, Marco Pastonesi, Italian writer who was with the Gazzetta dello Sport for 24 years and has written many great books about Italian cycling. Marco, looking at the final week of the Giro d'Italia, after today, the weekend stages and the big sort out today on the climb to Piancavallo, how do you see the final week of the race panning out now?
Well, now I think that the situation is clearer, and we know who is gonna compete, for the leadership. And I think Almeida, of course, who has at least one bonus, the final time trial. And then Kelderman, of course, who has the strongest team for the mountains. And especially today, he had very good teammates until the last 200 meters. And then I think Geoghegan Hart is very good. He's in very good condition, and I think that the Giro d'Italia will be won by one of these 3 guys. And if you want to know who exactly, well, I think that I want to make a surprise, and I think that Geoghegan is my favorite because he's young. He's the youngest. He is today he looked the strongest, and he has a very strong team. I mean, with people who know what they want to do, they have to do, and maybe some alliances.
Marco, how many minutes do you think Almeida needs? How many minutes do you think he can take in the final time trial? What advantage does somebody like Geoghegan Hart or Kelderman need on Almeida?
I think that he can get a couple of minutes, maybe, because the last time trial is different from all the others, and the gaps are less, than in the first stage. So maybe 1 minute and a half, and he can get. But if he can lose much more in the next stages, because the next stages there are at least 3, maybe 4, very, very hard. If they can race, obviously. But if there are big mountains, it's gonna be freezing, and so it will be very, very hard.
Do you think we could see a surprise from somebody? I know Nibali was not looking great today, but you always think with Nibali there is the potential for surprise. Maybe Fuglsang, again, he's not looking good, but given the mountains, given the weather, is it true to say that anything could happen still?
Obviously, this is the beautiful of cycling. Every day is an adventure. Every day is a surprise. Every day the history can be written in another way, in another language. So Nibali is a warrior, I told last time, but is an old warrior. So it's hard for him. But the endurance is the bonus, for Nibali. He can resist more than the other guys. Even today, he was not exhausted. He was not. He didn't collapse. He didn't. He was not out, even if it was not his perfect day.
Marco, do you now expect the Giro to go all the way to Milan, in spite of the fact that there have been some more positive tests for COVID-19? And obviously tomorrow, Monday, we still have more tests for the virus.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, and everybody fear that the Giro d'Italia can be stopped or can be, changed. By the test and by the COVID. Anyway, I think that as Mauro Vegni, the patron of the Giro d'Italia, said today, we want to go to Milano. We want to go to the end, and they will try to go to the end of the race, and they have obviously. They have two different ways, for every stage. So they have the stage with the Stelvio, but if the weather will be bad, they have another solution. So everything is ready. Everything is okay to get the riders to Milano. But the situation in Italy is getting worse, as everywhere, and every day there are lots of people infected, and some of them are even in the Giro d'Italia. It's normal. It's normal.
Marco, there was a letter written by the EF team asking for the Giro to be stopped early. What was the reaction to that in Italy?
Very bad, because I use the plurale, but we are trying to get everything perfect, everything okay, everything in order, everything according the rules. And the situation is not so bad in the Giro d'Italia. The drop keeps, the distances and keeps the health. So the letter from EF was I think that was bad. That's something. If you think in that way, the Vuelta will not be racing from the beginning, from the start, because in Spain the situation is much worse than in Italy. So, and the reaction was bad even in the peloton, even from the other teams, especially the Italian teams.
Marco, one final question. Next time we talk, we will know the winner of the Giro d'Italia. Who will that winner be? One word.
Geoghegan. How do you pronounce? It's very difficult to pronounce in Italy.
Geoghegan Hart. I think
Okay.
I think Geoghegan Hart.
I think this guy looks very tough.
Marco Pastonesi there speaking to William Fotheringham. Just to fry everybody's mind, the Vuelta starts on Tuesday, the 19th of October. 2 Grand Tours running at the same time. Good luck to everybody's internet connection. I know, Jeremy, you've not looked at it yet. Or I also have not looked at it, other than knowing a few of the riders who are there. Peter, a man who obviously did his homework at school weeks before it needed handing in, you've already previewed the first 7 stages.
Well, I partly looked at it because I'm going on holiday next week because I live in the Pyrenees and I'm going to stay on the slopes of the Tourmalet. So the stage 6 next Sunday, which is another Super Sunday, finishes at the top of the Tourmalet. So I was kind of looking ahead to that. But yeah, on Tuesday they start in the Basque Country. It kind of weaves around not really any easy stages in those first few days. I think there's one stage that might suit the sprinters. But, I mean, it's the Vuelta, lots of climbs. Even the easy stages have got lots of climbs. And then the first really big stage is the Tourmalet, like I say, next Sunday.
It's been snowing, hasn't it?
It has been snowing on the tour. It's been snowing right across the Pyrenees, but the roads are all open. None of the passes are closed yet. But there's from Wednesday, there's rain forecast in Luz Saint-Sauveur, which is where I'm staying next weekend. And if there's rain there's going to be a lot of snow up on the Tourmalet, which is about 1,000 metres higher than Luz Saint-Sauveur. So who knows what it might be like by next Sunday.
I tell you what you need to be. You need to be a ski jumper in that sort of environment. If only we knew one. We are done. Thank you, as always, to Jeremy and to Peter. And can I just say a socially distanced high five for nobody mentioning the C word through an entire podcast at this point in the year. Thank you, as always, to you for listening. You can always subscribe, whichever way you get your podcast. Reviews are always 8. If you want to review it, I won't hold that against you, unless it's negative, in which case my name is Jeremy Whittle. That's Whittle with 2 T's. Check out lacourseontête.com for all the usual quality writing and analysis. We'll see you next time.